She couldn't speak, but when this waitress used sign language, the little girl's smile said it all, and her millionaire dad couldn't hold back his tears. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. A millionaire businessman, polished suit, shiny watch, a man who was always in control of everything in his life. To the outside world, he was powerful, respected, untouchable. He could close million-dollar deals with a single phone call, but behind all that success was one thing he couldn't fix with money: his little daughter, Emma. Emma was born mute. Doctors said her voice may never come, and while he tried every specialist, every treatment, and every therapy money could buy, nothing worked. It broke his heart. Not because he saw her as incomplete, but because he couldn't give her the one gift he thought every child deserved: a voice to express her soul. For years, he poured himself into his business, maybe as a distraction, maybe as a way to hide from the guilt he carried. But Emma was different. She didn't care about money or mansions. All she wanted was love, and maybe someone who could truly understand her. One gray, rainy afternoon, something inside the businessman shifted. Instead of their usual chauffeur ride to a five-star restaurant, he decided to take Emma to a little cafe in town. It wasn't the kind of place he ever stepped into. The sign outside was simple, the windows fogged from warmth inside, and the smell of fresh coffee and pastries drifted out every time the door opened. Emma's eyes lit up. She loved the cozy, quiet feel of it. The rain tapping against the windows made her smile as she hugged her worn teddy bear, the one she carried everywhere. They sat at a corner table, and for once, the businessman didn't feel like a CEO, just a father trying to spend a simple day with his daughter. But what Emma wished, deep inside, was something her father couldn't buy her: someone who could truly hear her without sound. A young waitress with dark hair and warm eyes approached their table. She greeted them politely, took their order, and then something unusual happened. She noticed Emma making small gestures with her hands, little movements that only her father usually tried to decode. But instead of ignoring it, the waitress responded, slowly, carefully, with her hands. Emma froze for a moment, her big blue eyes widening. Then her teddy bear nearly tumbled from her lap as she burst into silent laughter. She signed back, shy at first, then faster, her little fingers dancing in excitement. The waitress smiled, responding with ease. She understood. She truly understood. For the first time outside of home, Emma wasn't trapped in silence. She wasn't different. She was just herself. The businessman sat there, stunned. His world was deals and contracts, numbers and power. But this simple exchange between a waitress and his daughter felt more valuable than anything he had ever bought. He watched as Emma laughed silently, her face glowing with joy he hadn't seen in years. She wasn't clinging to him anymore. She wasn't looking lost. She was alive, connected. And it wasn't because of the best doctors money could hire. It was because of a young woman who knew sign language, who chose kindness, who saw Emma not as a problem, but as a person. For the first time in a long while, the father felt tears sting his eyes. He quickly wiped them away, not wanting Emma to see. When the waitress walked away, Emma tugged at her father's sleeve and signed one word: friend. That simple moment shattered him inside. Here he was, a man who thought he could give his daughter everything. But in truth, she had only been waiting for something priceless: connection, understanding. That day, the millionaire made a decision. He asked the waitress if she would be willing to teach him sign language and, maybe, even spend time teaching Emma. The young woman agreed without hesitation. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, the father learned to hear his daughter without sound. For the first time, they could truly talk. Bedtime stories weren't just read, they were acted out with signs. Car rides weren't silent anymore. They were filled with laughter, gestures, and secret jokes only they understood. And every time Emma signed the word friend, the father realized something. The world's greatest wealth isn't measured in money, but in moments like these. That rainy afternoon at the cafe became the turning point in their lives. A man who once thought he could solve everything with money finally learned that sometimes The answers come from the simplest places: a stranger's kindness, a few hand gestures, and a child's laughter. And Emma? She didn't need a voice to be heard. She only needed someone willing to listen differently. From then on, the millionaire wasn't just a businessman. He became something far more valuable. He became the kind of father his daughter always needed. A young waitress walked up to their table. She was cheerful, with a bright smile, and carried the kind of warmth that instantly made people feel at home. Her name was Maya. Her dark hair was tied back neatly, and a small silver pendant dangled from her neck as she held a notepad in one hand. She looked like any ordinary waitress, kind, polite, professional. But in just a few moments, she would become someone extraordinary in the lives of a father and daughter. Maya noticed Emma right away, the shy little girl with sparkling eyes who clutched a teddy bear as though it were her lifeline. Emma's small shoulders were hunched, as if the world was too big, too noisy, too difficult to belong to. Maya's smile softened. She crouched down to Emma's level, and instead of speaking the usual words, "What would you like to order?" she paused. Then she did something completely unexpected. She raised her hands and signed. "Hello, what's your name?" Emma's eyes widened. She blinked once, then twice, as if she wasn't sure if this was real. For the first time in her life, a stranger, someone outside of her family or her teachers, was speaking her language. Her teddy bear almost slipped from her arms as her little fingers shot up, shaky at first, but then with an eagerness she couldn't contain. "My name is Emma," she signed back. Maya's smile grew even brighter. She nodded slowly, gracefully, and signed, "That's a beautiful name, Emma." And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. Emma laughed, a pure, silent laugh that lit up her face like sunshine breaking through the rain. The millionaire father sat frozen. He had watched his daughter struggle for years, watched her shrink away when others didn't understand her, watched her frustration when her words couldn't come out. But now he was seeing something entirely new. His daughter wasn't shy. She wasn't hiding. She was blooming. His jaw tightened, his polished composure cracking. He couldn't believe what he was witnessing. A waitress, just a simple waitress in a small cafe, had managed to reach his daughter in seconds, in a way that doctors and specialists with expensive degrees never could. He leaned back in his chair, stunned, as Emma's hands moved faster, signing clumsily but joyfully. She was telling Maya about her teddy bear, about how she liked the rain, about the chocolate cake she secretly hoped was on the menu. And Maya kept up with her, patient and kind, her hands flowing like music. The father felt his throat tighten. He blinked rapidly, trying to stop the sting in his eyes. When Maya stood up, she didn't just write down their order. She turned to the father and said softly, "Your daughter is amazing." He swallowed hard, his voice unsteady. You know sign language?" Maya nodded. "Yes, my younger brother is deaf. I grew up signing at home. When I saw your daughter, I just wanted her to feel included." The father stared at her, his usual confidence gone. He wasn't used to being speechless, but at that moment, he couldn't find words. All he could do was glance at Emma, who was bouncing in her seat, her teddy bear forgotten, her entire face glowing with joy. When Maya walked away to place the order, Emma tugged at her father's sleeve. Her little hands moved quickly. "She's my friend," she signed. The father's chest tightened. A simple word, yet it hit him harder than any business negotiation ever could. Friend. Emma had never signed that about anyone outside of family. And in that moment, he realized something painful. Despite all his wealth, he had never been able to give his daughter this connection, a sense of belonging. The answer hadn't been in hospitals or clinics or specialists with high fees. It had been something much simpler, someone who saw his daughter not as mute, not as broken, but as whole. By the time Maya returned with their food, the father had made a decision. With a voice that trembled slightly, he asked, "Would you be willing to teach me sign language, so I can talk to her like you do?" Maya's eyes softened, and she nodded immediately. "Of course. I'd be happy to." Emma clapped her hands silently, her laughter spilling out in the only way she knew how. And in that laughter, the father heard everything he had been searching for. That rainy afternoon, in a small cafe, a millionaire businessman discovered something no amount of money could buy. He realized that true wealth isn't found in bank accounts or business deals. It's found in moments of understanding, in kindness offered freely, in the silent laughter of a little girl who, for the first time, felt heard. And as they left the cafe that day, Emma didn't just hold her teddy bear. She held on to something far more precious: hope. And her father? He held on to the lesson that would change him forever. Sometimes, the smallest gestures carry the greatest power. In just a few seconds, the cafe transformed. It wasn't about coffee or business calls or the rainy weather outside anymore. It was about connection. Emma, her teddy bear balanced carefully on her lap, began signing eagerly. Her little hands flew with excitement, almost too fast for her small fingers to keep up. She told Maya about her teddy bear, his name, his adventures, how he never left her side. She signed about her favorite color, pink, and how she wished the whole world could be painted in it. She signed about how much she loved the rain, how she liked to watch raindrops race down the window and pretend they were little characters in a story. And Maya? She listened. She truly listened. Not the kind of listening where someone nods absent-mindedly, but the kind of listening that makes a person feel seen. Her hands responded fluently, her smile encouraging, her laughter bubbling softly at the right moments. She leaned closer, matching Emma's energy, making her feel like the most important person in the room. The rest of the cafe melted away. The chatter of other customers, the clinking of cups, even the hum of the espresso machine. None of it mattered. To Emma, it was as though the entire world had paused, leaving only her and Maya, locked in a conversation that required no sound. The father sat silently, watching from across the table. For a man who spent his life in control of every detail, he now felt powerless. His mind raced. How? How could this young waitress, a stranger who probably earned in a week what he made in an hour, give his daughter something he himself could not? He thought about all the things he had done for Emma, the endless appointments with specialists, the private tutors, the therapy sessions and shiny clinics. He had spared no expense. If money could buy a solution, he had paid for it. Yet still, Emma had lived in a quiet bubble, her world defined by silence. And now, in a small cafe on a rainy afternoon, that bubble had been broken, not by a doctor or a specialist, but by a girl with a warm smile and a patient heart. It wasn't money. It wasn't gifts. It wasn't the best schools or cutting-edge treatments. It was simply understanding. And that realization hit him harder than any business deal ever had. He had spent years building walls around himself. Polished suits, expensive cars, a mansion on the hill. To the world, he was untouchable. But as he watched his daughter laugh silently, her face glowing brighter than he'd ever seen, he felt those walls cracking. For once, his wealth meant nothing. His power meant nothing. He was just a father, humbled and shaken, sitting in a cafe where his daughter was finally being heard without ever speaking a word. He blinked hard, trying to hold back the sting in his eyes. But he couldn't stop the truth pressing against his chest. He had been trying so hard to fix Emma, when all she had ever needed was for someone to understand her as she was. When Maya left the table for a moment, Emma tugged at her father's sleeve, her hands moving quickly. "She's my friend," Emma signed. The father swallowed hard, his throat tightening. Friend. That simple word carried more weight than all the titles he had collected in boardrooms. In that instant, he saw his daughter differently. She wasn't broken. She didn't need fixing. She needed connection, kindness, and people willing to speak her language, even if that language wasn't spoken aloud. And perhaps, he thought, she needed him to step out of his own world of control and wealth and step into hers. When Maya returned with their food, the father looked at her, his voice quieter than usual. "Thank you," he said, and he meant it more than he had ever meant those 2 words in his life. Maya smiled knowingly. "She's wonderful," she replied. "You should be proud." He nodded, unable to say more. But inside, something shifted. He no longer saw his daughter as the one part of his life he couldn't control. Instead, he saw her as his teacher, the one who could show him what truly mattered. That day, In a modest cafe on a rainy afternoon, a millionaire businessman learned the most valuable lesson of his life. True wealth wasn't measured in money or success or power. True wealth was found in the sparkle of a little girl's eyes when she felt understood, in the silent laughter of a child who finally found a friend. And in that moment, he realized maybe Emma didn't need a voice to speak. She only needed someone willing to listen differently. The millionaire couldn't hold back anymore. His polished composure, the mask he wore in boardrooms, the calm he carried during tense negotiations, crumbled in the quiet corner of that small cafe. When Maya stepped away to grab their order, he leaned closer to his daughter. His voice softened, almost fragile, as if speaking too loudly might break the spell. "Emma, you're so happy right now," he whispered. Emma looked up at him, her little face glowing. She hugged her teddy bear and nodded with such enthusiasm it nearly made him laugh. But more than laughter, what he felt was relief. Relief that his daughter, who so often seemed isolated, had found a connection he had never been able to give her. For months, maybe even years, he had been carrying the silent weight of guilt. He could buy her anything, ponies, toys, trips to Disneyland, but none of it ever lit her up the way this simple conversation in sign language had. When Maya returned with their order, balancing a tray with practiced ease, the father looked at her differently. Not as a waitress, not as someone who was simply serving food, but as someone who had just changed his daughter's world. He cleared his throat, his voice carrying an honesty he rarely allowed himself in front of strangers. "Where did you learn sign language?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. Maya placed the tray down gently and smiled, her expression warm. "My younger brother is deaf," she explained softly. "Growing up, I learned to sign so he would never feel alone. I use it whenever I meet someone who needs it. It's just natural for me." Natural. That word struck him like a hammer. It lingered in his mind, louder than any business deal, sharper than any contract he had ever signed. Natural. Not forced. Not studied for years in an expensive institution. Not hired, paid, or transactional. It wasn't an obligation. It wasn't charity. It wasn't pity. It was simply human kindness. And that realization unraveled something inside him. For so long, he had believed love for his daughter meant fighting for solutions, doctors, tutors, the best resources money could buy. He thought being a good father meant fixing her silence, filling in what he saw as her missing pieces. But here was Maya, showing him that his daughter wasn't broken. She wasn't incomplete. She didn't need fixing. All she needed was understanding. And understanding didn't cost millions. It cost willingness, patience, heart. The millionaire, a man who had built skyscrapers that touched the clouds, closed deals that shaped entire industries, and filled his garages with cars most people only dreamed of, suddenly felt small. But for once, he didn't resent it. For once, being small wasn't weakness, it was freedom. Because in this tiny cafe, under the soft hum of conversation and the gentle tapping of rain against the windows, he had just learned one of life's greatest truths. Money can buy comfort, but it cannot buy connection. And what his daughter needed most in the world wasn't another luxury, another possession, another program. She needed to be seen. She needed to be heard, even in her silence. She needed someone willing to step into her world rather than force her into his. Emma, meanwhile, was still chattering away with her hands, telling Maya about how her teddy bear once rescued her from a nightmare, how she wanted to be a dancer even though she couldn't speak, how she loved rainy days because the world seemed calmer then. The father watched, his chest tight, with a strange mixture of pride and humility. She wasn't shy. She wasn't struggling. She was radiant, all because someone had taken the time to speak to her in the only language she had ever truly known. He realized that in all his striving to give her everything, he had overlooked the simplest thing, learning to communicate with her on her terms. As they ate their meal, the father's mind wasn't on his phone, his meetings, or his next deal. It was on Emma, on her hands moving gracefully, on her laughter spilling out in pure joy, on the way Maya treated her like the most important person in the room. And, silently, he made a promise. He would learn. He would study. He would practice. He would make sure his daughter never felt alone again. Because at that table, he finally understood being a father wasn't about fixing. It was about being there. It was about listening, not with ears, but with heart. When they left the cafe, the rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle. Emma skipped beside him, her teddy bear swinging at her side. She was smiling, still buzzing from the encounter. The father held her small hand in his, and for the first time in years, he felt like he was holding something far more precious than wealth or power. He wasn't holding the future CEO of his empire. He wasn't holding someone he needed to fix. He was holding his daughter, whole, perfect, and enough just as she was. And as the cafe lights faded behind them, he carried with him the lesson Maya had unknowingly gifted him. The greatest riches in life aren't found in what you own, but in who you understand. By the time they finished their coffee and snacks, Emma didn't want to leave. The little girl who usually sat quiet and withdrawn was now full of life. Her hands moved nonstop, signing story after story, giggling at Maya's replies. She signed about her favorite books, about how she sometimes wished her teddy bear could come alive, and about the time she tried to teach her dog to understand her hand signs. Maya listened to it all, laughing softly, never rushing, never making Emma feel different. For once, Emma wasn't the mute girl. She wasn't the child people stared at with pity or curiosity. She was simply Emma, seen, heard, and understood. Her father watched in awe, the corners of his mouth tugging into a smile he hadn't felt in years. He had seen his daughter happy before, but this was different. This wasn't happiness bought with gifts or toys. This was joy born from connection. As the clock ticked and the rain outside slowed to a drizzle, it became clear it was time to leave. The father stood, gathering his coat, while Emma clung tightly to her teddy bear, her eyes still glued to Maya as if she couldn't bear to end the moment. The father reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. It was his instinct. Money was always his way of solving things, rewarding good service, fixing problems, opening doors. He flipped through the bills, planning to leave a huge tip. In fact, part of him considered something bigger. What if he offered Maya a job? She could be Emma's private tutor, someone to teach his daughter every day, someone who could give her what he couldn't. But then he stopped. His hand froze over the wallet. For once, money didn't feel like the answer, because what Maya had given his daughter wasn't something that could be measured in bills or checks. He closed the wallet slowly, slid it back into his pocket, and instead looked Maya directly in the eye. "Thank you," he said, his voice carrying a sincerity that startled even him. "You've given my daughter more than I ever could. You gave her a voice today." Maya's expression softened. She shook her head gently and smiled, her eyes kind. "She already has a voice," she replied. "The world just needs to learn how to listen." The father felt his chest tighten. Those words echoed in his heart, cutting through the years of guilt, effort, and frustration. He realized then that Emma's silence had never been a weakness. It had been the world's inability to meet her where she was. Maya had reminded him of something he had long forgotten. His daughter wasn't broken. She wasn't missing anything. She was whole, just as she was. With that, father and daughter walked out of the cafe. The rain had eased into a soft drizzle, the kind that painted the streets with silver reflections. Emma skipped beside him, teddy bear swinging at her side, her shoes splashing lightly in the puddles. The father watched her, really watched her, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something shift inside him. He didn't feel powerful because of the skyscrapers he had built or the fortune he had amassed. He didn't feel powerful because of his control over contracts, deals, and numbers. He felt powerful because of love. Because in that moment, walking hand in hand with his daughter, he realized that being her father wasn't about fixing her. It was about understanding her, learning from her, and standing beside her no matter what. That rainy afternoon in the little cafe would never be just another day. It became a turning point, a quiet miracle wrapped in the ordinary. The millionaire finally understood that life's greatest treasures aren't found in wealth, luxury, or power. They are found in the smallest gestures, the ones that seem simple but carry the weight of the world. A young waitress raising her hands to sign a single word. A little girl's eyes lighting up with joy. A father finally seeing what had been in front of him all along. As they disappeared into the rainy street, Emma hummed her silent laughter, and her father carried with him the lesson he would never forget. Sometimes, the biggest miracles come from the smallest acts of kindness. And that's the beautiful reminder we all need. Sometimes the simplest acts of kindness can change a life forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching stories just like this one. And remember, the world always needs a little more kindness.